When a book gets adapted to the big screen, there truly is only two ways it ends up going. It either ends up surpassing the original text in popularity, becoming a staple of cinema and leaving a lasting impression. That, or wind up being so bad that they split the community in half, leaving it practically in shambles. There are countless examples of both good and bad book adaptations, but today on King Productions, I will be analyzing 6 retellings of literature that have either strengthened or weakened the text that it reworked, starting off strong with one of my favorite trilogies, The Lord of the Rings. Originally adapted from J.R.R. Tolkien's series of books that went by the same name, The Lord of the Rings trilogy has cemented itself as one of the greatest adaptations of text into cinema of all time. The director, Peter Jackson, went through many great lengths to make sure that this trilogy matched the grandiose and scale of the original text. However, there are bound to be some issues when adapting over 1,000 pages of literature into a nearly 9-hour trilogy. So let's analyze what ended up on the chopping block. Some Tolkien fans were upset at how much was left out of the beginning due to time limitations, like the Old Man Willow, Fatty Bulger, and Tom Bombadil. But of course, they had to remove some elements if they wanted to meet the runtime. Some might point this out as a reason that Lord of the Rings is a bad adaptation, but I think that the sheer amount of content pulled directly out of the books more than makes up for it. And of course, the order of scenes was inconsistent with the book, but this is excusable due to the fact that the film needed to constantly be showing what characters are up to, rather than the half-and-half plot lines of the original novel. While many fans, including myself, could pass off these inconsistencies, as most of the time it led to a better viewing experience of the movie, this cannot be said for the next movie I will be discussing, despite being so closely related to Lord of the Rings. On the other side of the coin, we have The Hobbit, a film massively hated by Lord of the Rings fans and average moviegoers alike. Whereas Lord of the Rings had too much content to fit into its movies, The Hobbit suffered the opposite, trying to adapt one novel into a trilogy of 3 movies. This led to the planning team having to add characters, plot lines, and much more that was never in the source text. Many fans of the books complained that the film felt less like an adaptation and more like its own trilogy, completely unrelated to the book. These movies felt more like the executives at Warner Brothers trying to stretch a short children's story into a full-fledged trilogy, which made it seem like they had to add a lot of filler to make the movies long enough. As an example, characters like Legolas, Sauron, and Radagast were never in the book, and there were even more characters that are completely original, like Tauriel, or the Orc Prince. This trilogy is the perfect example of a book adaptation done poorly, leading a lot of people to swear it off from the Lord of the Rings universe. This film made fans especially disappointed because it came from the same director as Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson, and they expected a trilogy that could hold up to the original. Naturally, many fans were confused when they saw characters not originally in the text, and this led to them questioning the creative choices on this movie. Whereas The Hobbit had fans relieved once they were done with it, this next movie that we'll be talking about had fans begging for more once they were done with it. I'm really sorry for that joke. Anyway, I don't know if you've ever seen the Dune book, but it's a fairly large novel. Now, when the filmmakers first tried to adapt this book to the screen, well, it's safe to say it didn't go well. Critics said the special effects were mediocre, it was hard to follow the fast-paced story, and the special effects weren't that good. Now, of course, most of these reasons aren't related to it being an adaptation, but it should be noted that this movie was not well received. Fast forward a few decades, Warner Bros. Announced the Dune movie, and fans were ecstatic when they saw the trailer. It looked like it would finally be an accurate portrayal of the events in the Dune novel. Instead of trying to cram it all into one movie, they were splitting it up into multiple films to make it more faithfully paced. Fans were so excited for this movie to come out. And when it finally did come out, everything the audience wanted was true. It was a great adaptation of the first part of the Dune novel, and finally gave longtime Dune fans consolation for the first film's inaccuracies. It went on to become even larger than the book, with some moviegoers not even realizing it was based off of a novel. Naturally, however, some parts did have to get cut, leaving fans a little sad on what did. There was a dinner party scene in the books that many fans thought would have made the film leagues better if it were included. And even the most critical fans still thought it at least felt like Dune, even though some elements were added/removed. Although, like Lord of the Rings, many people were able to write off inconsistencies in the movie as they had to be made in order to make the movie short enough. And this movie was already filled to the brim with content. And say what you will about the first Dune movie, at least the author liked it, which is certainly a lot more than I can say about this next movie. Before the Disney Plus series, Percy Jackson the Lightning Thief came out, and it was not well received in the community. Many fans grew up reading the series and were incredibly optimistic when the movie was announced, but it did not land well at all. I mean, even the author of the series, Rick Riordan, has openly criticized the films for their poor handling of the story. He even went as far as to leak emails he sent to the producers of the movie in which he voiced his concerns with their handling of the adaptation. He then went on the record as saying he chose to ignore the films as they changed too much to be considered adaptations. Speaking of things they changed, some of their choices are just downright confusing. They chose to change everything in the story, just skip right over most of it, in order to add their own story, which just ended up being a generic A to B plot that had no creativity whatsoever. It leaves out so many characters and antagonists and truly baffles you on why they even chose to cut what they did. It's no surprise that fans hated these movies. After all, what reason would they have not to? Even when the author is begging you to change your film, it truly is a mystery on why the producers chose to follow through on all the changes they did. It especially was surprising to fans because the person who made this movie also helped with one of the best adaptations of all time, Harry Potter. Unlike Percy Jackson, these films chose to work directly with their author, leading to the films being so accurate to this day. It's a true challenge to find an element of Harry Potter novels that hasn't been translated to the movies, minus a few small character changes, like Dobby or Neville giving Harry the gillyweed in Goblet of Fire. The films and books truly have a symbiotic relationship with each other, both having a positive effect on one another. The books lead to more people wanting to watch the movie when they're done, and the popularity of the films leads to more people wanting to read the books. It's a perfect example of what an adaptation should be, an extension of the books for fans, while also being able to stand alone as their own movies. The choice to have the actors grow up along with their characters was perfect, and it led to the films seeming more like the books, where we get to see the characters grow and evolve. Also, the casting seemed great, with J.K. Rowling playing a personal part in who played who to match the books perfectly. Even if you don't like the movies or even J.K. Rowling, anyone can admit these films are great adaptations of the series. When the author works this closely with the directors and producers, it's no surprise that these films ended up being as accurate as they were, making them a staple when it comes to talking about book adaptations. The original Hunger Games book adaptations were fairly mediocre. They were passable as adaptations, but not very good as the movies went on. It's a shame because a lot of people really like the books, but the movies are still fine for what they are. When Lionsgate announced that they would be adapting the prequel to the Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, fans were excited to see a modern Hunger Games movie that could exceed the original movies in popularity and style. Unfortunately, like with most adaptations, when the movie came out, fans were divided. Some said that the movie was charming and didn't have to be an exact copy of the book. Others complained about how the movie tried to condense such a big book into only one film. Now, I have some say in this because I actually read the book when the movie came out, and I was disappointed in the way this movie chose to handle the ending of the games. In the book, after the contestants get picked off one by one, eventually only Lucy Gray is standing as the winner. But this is after the course of many days, after having to prove herself as a worthy fighter. In the movie, the creators of the game just release a ton of snakes that kill everyone except Lucy, leaving her the winner. I was incredibly disappointed by this ending to the games. It felt like it just immediately happened so we could move on to the next plot point. When adapting a movie, it's important to actually adapt the film, and not just change important story elements to fit everything into the runtime. Nothing is more apparent than that the producers didn't know what to keep from the book. And the worst part is I probably could have seen myself enjoying the movie if it actually followed through on what happened in the book. Well, there you have it, 6 good and bad adaptations of literature. This has helped me reflect on some movies and books I remember reading or watching as a kid, and if you don't agree with any of these placements, be sure to let me know in the comments. And if you like this analysis, be sure to stay tuned for the next video analyzing what makes a great villain. So subscribe so you can get notified when it releases. Also, this is my first video, so chances are you aren't subscribed anyways, and if you did, that would truly mean a lot to me. With that said, thank you for watching.